Hello, Rob Venn here. This is the third in the narrative structure videos I've done. This one's going to be advanced theories. We also had, the beginning one was basic theories, and intermediate theories was the second one. So today we're going to look at some more advanced stuff, more big words. First one we're going to look at, Pam Cook. Now, I learned this one at A level. It's got lots of big words in it, which sound confusing, but when we look at it, it's actually pretty simple. If you remember this one, it'll make you look clever in your exam. Now, Pam Cook said that the standard film narrative structure should have 1. Linearity of cause and effect within an overall trajectory of enigma resolution, 2. A high degree of narrative closure, and 3. A fictional world that contains verisimilitude, especially governed by spatial and temporal coherence. Now, what does this mean? Let's break it down. Linearity of cause and effect within a basic trajectory of enigma resolution. Something that's linear goes in a straight line. Something that has a trajectory follows a straight line. So a story has a straight line. Beginning, middle, end. Cause and effect. Something happens, it causes a problem. An effect, right? What's an enigma? An enigma is a problem, it's a question, something to be solved. Resolution is obviously resolving that. In other words, basic, straightforward, linear story, beginning, middle, and end. Something happens, it has an effect that needs fixing, and it's all about solving problems. Oh, it's simple. Second one, high degree of narrative closure. You need a denouement. You want to wrap up all your loose ends at the end. All your plots, points, and subplots have to be resolved. Doesn't always happen, to be fair, but it should do. And then 3, a fictional world that contains verisimilitude, convincing, believable world for our story to take place in, needs to be convincingly believable. Especially governed by spatial and temporal coherence. If something coheres, it sticks. It has to make sense. Spatial and temporal makes sense in terms of space, where, geography, place, and time, temporal. So in other words, our story has to be believable. Our story world, our diegesis, called the diegetic effect. It has to be believable and convincing, and it has to be, believable in terms of place and time. So, if we're looking at an historical drama, right? Look at something like Gladiator, and this illustrates the difference between verisimilitude and realism, right? In ancient Rome, real gladiators would have had their faces plastered over advertising hoardings. They did product placement. They sponsored brands. They had, they were brand ambassadors, just like sports people are today. He wanted to put, Ridley Scott wanted to put that in the film, but they left it out because they didn't think anyone would believe it. You see statues in that film, they're white marble, just like they are nowadays, but in ancient Rome, they were brightly coloured. So there's a difference between verisimilitude, what seems convincing to the audience, and what is actually realistic. Equally, if we're making a, say, science fiction film or a fantasy story, we need to make it convincing, we need to make it seem believable. We know that, spaceships can't fly faster than the speed of light. We know there's no such thing as a dragon. We need to make the audience believe that dragons could be real, and this is where really good special effects come in. Equally, it's where bad special effects can ruin a movie. So again, if you're watching Gladiator and you notice that one of the characters wearing a Casio digital watch, it would ruin the effect, wouldn't it? All right. Excellent theory, that one. Good one to quote. Now, getting a little bit more complicated. We're back to Vladimir Propp, only this time along with Victor Shklovsky. I hope I pronounced that right. Some big words here. Now, they talked about the difference between sujet and fabula. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is again is like the difference between story and plot and narrative. So sujet is an employment of narrative. It's the things that happen in the story. It's the structure of that story. Alright? It's the way the story is told. Right? Fabula, however, is the chronological order of the events contained in the story. So for the fabula, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and this happens in a chronological order. But films are not necessarily shown in that order. We can have flashbacks, we can have flash forwards, we can have dream sequences or memories, we can have parallel action, we can have multiple viewpoints. That's where the sujet comes in. Alright? So fabula is kind of like story, I guess. Sujet is more like about the narrative. And then a last one. This one specifically applies to horror, but it's very similar to some of the other ones. This was Null Carol's theory in his book, The Philosophy of Horror, Paradoxes of the Heart. Very similar to what people like Todorov and Robert McKee and Vladimir Propp and Joseph Campbell are talking about, but specific to horror. Now, we're assuming at the beginning we've had our equilibrium, we've shown our ordinary world. What he says the disruption in horror films is called, it's called the onset phase. Some kind of monster or disorder is created. Then there's the discovery phase. The protagonists discover the disorder or the monster. Now, at this point, our hero, or probably more likely heroine, because women or girls in particular are usually the heroes of a lot of horror films. At first, no one believes them. What they're saying is fantastical. So there has to be a confirmation phase. The protagonist must convince others that the monster and disorder exists and of its dangers. This will usually involve what Vladimir Propp would have called a donor or a magical helper. Some expert will come along to deliver exposition, explain to the characters and the audience what's going on. Think Dr. Loomis in the Halloween movies. This will convince people that there's a danger that needs to be fixed. Think Van Helsing and Dracula. Then there's the confrontation disorder phase. The protagonist has to destroy the monster to restore normality, which of course would be our new equilibrium at the end of it. This one might be a nice one to apply to something like Pan's Labyrinth. So there are some more advanced ones. These are all of the terms that you will have learned through these 3 videos. Denouement, plot, story, narrative, linearity, trajectory, enigma, narrative closer, verisimilitude, temporal, spatial, equilibrium, binary opposite, fabula, and sujet. They all need adding to your glossary. And then we've got, I've missed Null Carol off this one, you need to add Null Carol to that, but Pam Cook, Vladimir Propp, and Victor Zelensky, that last one should be Null Carol. So those are some more advanced theories. Don't necessarily need those ones, but they would be very useful if you're aiming for those higher grade levels. Again, if you've got any questions, come and see me. You know where I am. There are plenty of other narrative theories you can look up. Maybe you've learned some another subject like English. It might be very easily applicable. Do your own bit of research. Okay, talk to you next time.